His fingers were still in her mouth when she bit down hard enough to taste blood. The scream that came out of Chief Reeve wasn't fear, it was shock. The kind that only hits when prey turns predator. Marcus Hale lunged from behind her, and Riley's elbow cracked into his ribs before her boot crushed his groin. He dropped like a stone. Corey's phone clattered to the floor, still recording. Lieutenant Moss backed against the locked door, eyes wide, finally understanding what they'd all missed. The woman they'd trapped in Bay 7 wasn't just a Navy SEAL. She was the evidence they'd never see coming. And in the next 60 seconds, she was going to destroy everything they'd built. 3 men, 1 locked room. And the mistake they'd all made was thinking she was the one who couldn't escape. Before we show you how one Navy SEAL turned a blackmail trap into a federal takedown, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. Because this story didn't just end careers, it exposed an entire system. And you need to hear how it started. Riley Cade stepped off the transport van into air that tasted like salt and gasoline. The Joint Maritime Training Complex sprawled low and gray against the Georgia coast, all concrete and chain link, and that specific kind of institutional ugliness that said, government contract, lowest bidder, nobody cares how it looks. The kind of place that trained sailors and Marines in close quarters combat, shipboard security, maritime interdiction, skills that kept America's naval assets protected. Or, at least, that's what the brochures said. Riley adjusted the strap of her duffel and felt the weight of the fake credential packet tucked inside. The cover story was simple, boring by design. Lieutenant Junior Grade Riley Cade, Maritime Safety Liaison from Naval Special Warfare Command, here for a 2-week instructor exchange. The paperwork said she'd teach advanced combat swimming and small unit tactics. The paperwork lied. The truth was sealed in a classified file sitting in an NCIS field office 300 miles north. The truth was that JMTC had a problem, and it wasn't about training standards. Over the past 18 months, 12 female personnel had transferred out under sudden, quiet circumstances. No formal complaints, no investigations, just gone. And every single one of them had been involved, directly or peripherally, with logistics operations, cargo manifests, supply chain audits, inventory reconciliation. The kind of work where you notice when things don't add up. The kind of work where noticing can get you silenced. Riley didn't look like someone who'd spent the last 5 years kicking down doors in East Africa and the Middle East. She was 5'4", lean in the way distance runners are lean, with auburn hair pulled into a tight braid and green eyes that most people described as friendly, right up until they realized she'd been cataloging exits and sightlines while they talked. She had a small anchor tattoo behind her left ear, barely visible unless you knew to look. Most people didn't. The check-in desk was staffed by a yeoman who looked like he'd been awake for 36 hours straight. His name tape read Morales, and his coffee cup had a lipstick stain that definitely wasn't his. "Lieutenant Cade," he said, scanning her orders without meeting her eyes. "Maritime Safety Liaison. We don't get many of those." "First time for everything," Riley said. He typed something, frowned at his screen, typed again. "System's being weird. Give me a second." Riley waited. She'd learned a long time ago that the best way to gather intelligence was to let people fill silence on their own. "There it is," Morales muttered. "You're in Barracks C, 3rd floor. Training block starts Monday, but Chief Reeve wanted me to tell you he's running a demonstration tomorrow if you want to observe. Get a feel for how we do things here." "Chief Reeve?" Riley repeated, keeping her tone neutral. "Yeah, he basically runs the CQB program. You'll meet him, everybody does." Morales slid a temporary badge across the counter, and something in his voice changed. Not quite a warning, more like resignation. "Just He's got his own way of doing things. Old school, you know? Riley clipped the badge to her collar. Old school how? Morales glanced toward the hallway behind him, then back at her. Let's just say he believes in maintaining standards, discipline, chain of command. The guys respect him. And the women? The yeoman's face went carefully blank. I just process paperwork, ma'am. Riley picked up her duffel. I'm sure you do.
Barrack C smelled like industrial cleaner and stale air conditioning. Riley's room was exactly what she expected. Narrow bunk, metal locker, desk barely big enough for a laptop, window overlooking the parking lot. She dropped her duffel, locked the door, and pulled out her phone. The encrypted message app loaded with a single tap. She typed fast. On site, initial contact unremarkable, mentioned Chief Reeve unprompted, possible control figure. Will observe and report. The reply came in less than 30 seconds. Her NCIS handler, a woman named Torres, who Riley had never met in person, always responded fast. Reeve is priority 1. 3 of the 12 transfers mentioned him by name in exit interviews. Nothing actionable, but pattern is clear. Be careful. These guys know how to stay clean. Riley typed back. Clean until they're not. She deleted the conversation thread, powered down the phone, and pulled out a second device, a gray market burner loaded with nothing but a voice recorder app and a dead man's switch program. If she didn't check in every 12 hours, the audio files would auto-upload to an NCIS server, and her location would ping. She tucked it into the lining of her boot and went to find the gym. JMTC's main training bay was bigger than she expected, and louder. 30 or 40 personnel cycled through drills, grappling on mats, striking heavy bags, running through shoot-house scenarios with rubber guns and chalk rounds. The air was thick with sweat and adrenaline, and that specific frequency of masculine energy that always ramped up when someone was watching. And someone was always watching. Riley spotted him immediately. Chief Warrant Officer Dalton Reeve stood near the center mat, arms crossed, watching 2 sailors go through a takedown drill. He was maybe 6'2", broad through the shoulders, with graying hair buzzed close and a jaw that looked like it had stopped a few punches in its time. He didn't shout corrections. He didn't need to. When he spoke, people leaned in. Reset, he called out, voice carrying, without effort. You're telegraphing the entry. She sees it coming a mile away. Try again. One of the sailors, a woman, Riley noted, probably early 20s, adjusted her stance and tried the drill again. This time she got the leverage right and put her partner on the mat. Reeve nodded. Better. But if this were real, you'd already be dead. Speed matters. Surprise matters. Hesitation gets you killed. The woman nodded, breathing hard. Or worse, Reeve added, and something in the way he said it made Riley's jaw tighten. A heavy-set man, built like a linebacker, drifted over to Reeve's side. His name tape read, Hale, and he moved with the kind of casual menace that came from knowing he was the biggest person in most rooms. Chief, we running Bay 7 tonight? Hale asked, voice low but not quite low enough. Reeve glanced at him, then around the room. His eyes landed on Riley for half a second. Later. We've got a visitor. Riley didn't look away. She walked straight toward them. Lieutenant Cade, Reeve said, and his smile was all teeth. Heard we had Navy brass stopping by. You here to teach us something or learn something?
Little of both, Riley said. I was told you run a solid program here. We do. Old school, no shortcuts. People either rise to the standard or they wash out. He extended a hand. His grip was firm, just on the edge of too firm. Dalton Reeve, this is Petty Officer Hale. He handles the heavy lifting. Hale nodded but didn't offer his hand. "I was watching your drills," Riley said. "Clean technique, though I noticed you emphasize compliance over escape." Reeves' smile didn't change, but his eyes did. "Compliance keeps you alive long enough to escape. You go in swinging, you die tired." "Or you go in smart and they never see it coming," Riley said. The air shifted. A few people nearby stopped what they were doing. Reeve laughed, short and sharp. "You a shooter or an instructor, Lieutenant?" "Both." "Then maybe you'd like to demonstrate. Show us how Navy Special Warfare does it."
It wasn't a request. Riley looked at the mat, then back at him.
"Sure. Who's my partner?"
Reeve gestured to Hale. "Marcus here could use a warm-up." Hale stepped onto the mat, rolling his shoulders. He outweighed Riley by at least 100 pounds. Someone in the back muttered, "This is gonna be ugly." Riley kicked off her boots and stepped onto the mat in socked feet. She didn't stretch, didn't crack her knuckles. She just waited. "Standard drill," Reeve called out. "Escape from rear bear hug. Go!" Hale moved faster than he looked like he could. His arms came around Riley from behind, locking across her chest and pinning her arms. He lifted slightly, just enough to put her off balance. Riley didn't panic. She dropped her weight, creating space between her body and his grip. Then she snapped her head back, not hard enough to break his nose, but hard enough to make him flinch. His grip loosened. She drove her elbow into his floating rib, twisted her hips, and slipped out of the hold like water through fingers. Before Hale could reset, she had his wrist locked and his shoulder hyperextended, forcing him down to one knee. The room went silent. Riley released him and stepped back. "Compliance doesn't mean surrender. It means making them think you've surrendered." Hale stood slowly, rubbing his shoulder. He didn't look angry. He looked surprised. Reeve clapped once, twice. "Not bad, Lieutenant. Not bad at all. Maybe we'll actually learn something this week." But his eyes said something different. They said, "You just made a mistake." That night, Riley sat in her barracks room with her laptop open, reviewing personnel files she'd been given access to under the guise of preparing training rosters. Most of it was routine: service records, qualification dates, performance reviews, but she'd learned to read between the lines. 3 names kept appearing in proximity to the women who'd transferred out: Reeve, Hale, and a junior specialist named Corey Ventris, who worked in the communications office. Ventris was 26, tech-savvy, unremarkable in every official capacity. But Riley had noticed him in the training bay earlier, leaning against the wall with his phone out. At first, she thought he was just screwing around. Then she realized his camera was angled toward the women's side of the mat. And he wasn't the only one watching. He was the one recording. She pulled up the JMTC Internal Incident Report database. It was supposed to log every injury, every conflict, every complaint. In the past 2 years, there have been 43 reports filed by male personnel, 6 filed by women, and of those 6, 4 had been marked resolved informally, with no follow-up documentation. Riley clicked on one. The complainant's name was redacted, but the summary wasn't. Inappropriate physical contact during training. Resolved via counseling. She clicked on another. Unprofessional comments regarding appearance, addressed at unit level. And another. Unwanted recording during off-duty hours. Resolved. Every single one marked resolved. None escalated. None investigated. Riley closed the laptop and stared at the wall. This wasn't just a culture problem. It was a system. And systems didn't build themselves. The next morning, Riley found the morale board. It was tucked in a side hallway near the administrative offices, covered in photos and printouts. Birthday cakes, unit barbecues, someone's promotion ceremony. Normal stuff. Except for the bottom corner. Someone had printed a photo of a female sailor mid-stride during a run, taken from behind at an angle that focused on her body, not her face. Across the top, in thick black marker, Motivation Monday. Below it, another photo, a woman climbing out of a pool during combat swim training, water streaming off her body. The caption read, "Best training day ever." Riley felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. She pulled out her phone and took pictures. Not of the women. She didn't need to humiliate them further. She photographed the handwriting, the marker style, the edges of the photos where metadata might still be recoverable. Pretty messed up, right? Riley turned. A young woman stood a few feet away, maybe 23, with short blonde hair and corporal's insignia. Her name tape read Delacroix. "Yeah," Riley said quietly. "It is." Delacroix glanced down the hallway, then stepped closer. Her voice dropped. "You're the new instructor, right? From NSW?" Riley nodded. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." Delacroix hesitated, chewing her lower lip. If someone told you they saw something wrong, something that could get people in trouble, would you believe them? Or would you think they were just trying to start drama?" Riley turned to face her fully. "I'd believe them, and I'd ask what they saw." The younger woman's eyes flicked toward the morale board, then away. "Bay 7. That's where they do the extra training. Reeve calls it professional development. But girls who go in there, they come out different, quiet, and then they leave. Do you know what happens inside?" "No." "But I know Ventress is always hanging around before and after, and I know the cameras in that hallway get recalibrated every Friday at 1800. Maintenance logs say it's routine, but it's always the same time. Every week." Riley filed that away. "Has anyone reported it?" Delacroix laughed, but there was no humor in it. "To who? Reeves' boys are everywhere. And Lieutenant Moss, she's the EO rep. She's the one who tells you to stop making trouble." "Lieutenant Moss?" "Yeah, she's one of them. I don't know how, but she is. Girls go to her for help, and next thing you know, they're getting counseled for attitude problems and transferred out." Delacroix looked at Riley with something close to desperation. "I'm not crazy. This isn't in my head." Riley met her eyes. "I believe you." Delacroix exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. "If you're really from NSW, if you're really who they say you are, maybe you can do something, because the rest of us can't." Before Riley could respond, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Delacroix straightened immediately, her expression going neutral. Lieutenant Kira Moss rounded the corner. She was mid-30s, fit, with dark hair pulled into a regulation bun, and a smile that looked friendly until you realized it never reached her eyes. "Corporal Delacroix," Moss said warmly. "Aren't you supposed to be at morning formation?" "Yes, ma'am. I was just..." "Then you should go." Delacroix nodded and walked away without looking at Riley. Moss turned her attention to Riley, and the smile widened. "Lieutenant Cade, I heard you made quite the impression yesterday. Marcus Hale doesn't get put on his ass very often." "It was just a drill," Riley said. "Still, you've got people talking." Moss stepped closer, her voice dropping into something that sounded like camaraderie. "Look, I know it's your first week, and I know how these places can feel when you're new, especially for women. So if you need anything, someone to show you the ropes, someone to talk to, I'm the equal opportunity rep. That's literally my job." "I appreciate that," Riley said. "Good. Because between you and me..." Moss glanced toward the morale board, then back. Some of the guys here have old-fashioned ideas. They don't mean any harm, but they don't always understand how things look to outsiders. It's better to work with them than against them. Makes life easier for everyone. Riley kept her expression neutral. I'll keep that in mind. Great. Oh, and Chief Reeve mentioned you might be interested in observing some of our advanced training rotations. Bay 7, Friday night. It's where we do the high-speed stuff, tactical breaching, hostage rescue scenarios. Really solid training. You should come. There it was, the invitation, the setup. Riley nodded slowly. I'll be there. Moss's smile brightened. Perfect. I'll let the chief know. She walked away, heels clicking against the tile floor. Riley stood alone in the hallway, staring at the morale board, at the photos of women who'd been turned into jokes, into objects, into leverage. She pulled out her phone and sent a message to Torres. They just invited me to Bay 7, Friday, 1800. The reply came fast. Do not go alone. We can pull you now if... Riley deleted the message before finishing it. She typed one word back. No. Then she added, I'm getting you everything. Just be ready to move when I do. She hit send, deleted the thread, and walked toward the training bay. Because she hadn't come here to observe, she'd come here to burn it all down. The training bay smelled like chlorine and rust when Riley arrived Monday morning. The combat dive tank dominated the east wall, a 40-foot pool built deep enough for full-gear descents, murky enough that you couldn't see bottom even when the lights were on. Chief Reeve stood at the edge with his arms crossed, watching 3 sailors struggle through underwater navigation drills. 2 minutes over standard, he called out as the last one surfaced, gasping. That's how you drown, people. Speed isn't optional when you're 60 feet down and the hull's flooding. Riley set her gear bag down near the bleachers. She wasn't scheduled to teach until Wednesday, but Reeve had sent word through Hale that morning instructors were expected to observe all sessions, learn the rhythm of the place. She knew what that really meant. They wanted to see if she'd keep her mouth shut. Reeve spotted her and waved her over. Lieutenant, you dive? Yeah. Combat certified? Among other things. He smiled that smile that never looked friendly. Then suit up. Let's see what NSW teaches these days. 10 minutes later, Riley was in the water, full gear, 70 pounds of equipment dragging her down into water so cold it made her teeth ache. The drill was simple on paper. Navigate a submerged obstacle course while your team tried to screw with your regulator, your mask, your fins. The point wasn't the course. The point was staying calm when everything went wrong at once. Riley dropped below the surface and the world went quiet. She'd always loved this part. The weight, the pressure, the way panic couldn't find you if you didn't give it oxygen. She kicked forward, hands out, reading the obstacles by touch more than sight. Someone grabbed her fin from behind, yanked hard. She let it go, kicked free with the other leg, kept moving. A hand reached for her mask. She blocked it, redirected, kept her breathing steady. 2 breaths in, 2 breaths out. The rhythm that kept you alive when the water wanted you dead. She cleared the course in 4 minutes 12 seconds. When she surfaced, Reeve was checking his stopwatch with an expression that looked like he'd bitten into something sour. Not bad, he said. For NSW, Riley pulled off her mask. What's the record? 410. Marcus said it last year. So I just beat it. The sailors on the deck went quiet. Hale, standing near Reeve, shifted his weight like he wasn't sure whether to be impressed or offended. Reeve's jaw tightened. Course conditions change. Water temperature's different. Visibility's... Excuses don't make you faster, Riley said. She hauled herself out of the pool and started stripping her gear. They just make you slower next time. She walked away before he could respond.
but she felt his eyes on her back the whole way to the locker room. She'd just humiliated him in front of his people, and that was exactly the point. Men like Reeve controlled through dominance and reputation. You couldn't beat them by playing nice. You beat them by being better and making sure everyone saw it. In the locker room, Riley found Corporal Delacroix sitting on a bench, head down, still in her wetsuit. "You okay?" Riley asked.
Delacroix looked up fast, eyes red.
"Yeah, fine. Just water got in my regulator. I panicked." Riley sat down next to her. "Happens to everyone. First time I did deep water rescue training, I nearly drowned my instructor." "Really?" "Really. He grabbed my tank valve and I thought he was trying to kill me. I punched him in the throat." Riley smiled a little. "They almost kicked me out of the program for that." Delacroix laughed, shaky but real. "What did you do?" "Got better. Learned the difference between a threat and a test. And then I made sure nobody could ever make me panic like that again." Riley glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice. "You said girls who go to Bay 7 come out different. You know any of them well enough to talk to me?" Delacroix hesitated. "There's one. Amy Chen. She transferred to a logistics unit in North Carolina 3 months ago. But we still text sometimes."
She won't say what happened, but she told me once that if I ever got called to Bay 7, I should find a way to be sick that day.
"Can you get me your number?" "Why?" "Because I need to know what I'm walking into Friday night." Delacroix's eyes went wide. "You're actually going?" "Yeah." "You shouldn't. I'm serious. Whatever they're doing in there—" "I know," Riley said quietly. "That's why I have to go." Delacroix stared at her for a long moment, then pulled out her phone. She typed fast, then showed Riley the screen. A phone number glowed in the dim light. "She won't talk to you if she thinks you're investigating," Delacroix said. "She's too scared. But if you tell her you're worried about someone else, maybe she'll listen." Riley memorized the number, then nodded. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Delacroix said. "Just don't end up like the rest of them. Okay?" Riley didn't answer. She just stood up and walked out, because the only way to make that promise was to finish what she'd started. That night, Riley called Amy Chen from a parking lot 2 miles off base, using the burner phone that couldn't be traced back to NCIS or NSW or anyone else who might spook her. Chen picked up on the third ring. "Hello? Amy, my name's Riley. I'm stationed at JMTC right now, and I got your number from Natalie Delacroix. I'm calling because I think something's wrong here, and I think you might know what it is." Silence. Then, "I don't talk about that place anymore. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to help me protect the next person they go after." More silence. Riley could hear Chen breathing, could almost feel her deciding whether to hang up or keep listening. "What do you want to know?" Chen finally said, voice barely above a whisper. "Bay 7. What happens there?" Chen exhaled shakily. "They call it professional development training, leadership evaluation." Whatever sounds official enough that you don't question it. They tell you it's voluntary, but if you say no, you get labeled uncooperative. Attitude problem. Suddenly, your evaluations drop, and you're getting written up for things that never mattered before. Who runs it? Reeve. Always Reeve. Sometimes Hale's there, sometimes Ventress. And Lieutenant Moss. She's the one who brings you in. She makes it sound like an opportunity. Extra quals, fast-track promotion. She's really good at it. Riley's grip tightened on the phone. What do they do once you're inside? They lock the door. They tell you it's a privacy thing so you can speak freely. Then they start asking questions about your personal life, your relationships, your weaknesses. They say it's psychological resilience training. And then, Chen's voice cracked. They film you. They tell you to say things, do things.
Nothing that crosses the line enough to be prosecutable, but enough that if it ever got out, your career would be over. Enough that you'd do anything to make sure it doesn't. They blackmail you. Not directly. They just make sure you know the footage exists. Make sure you know what would happen if you didn't cooperate with other things. Riley's jaw clenched. What other things? I worked in supply logistics. I flagged a shipment that didn't match the manifest. Wrong weight, wrong destination code. I filed a discrepancy report like I was supposed to. 2 days later, Moss called me to Base 7. A week after that, the discrepancy report disappeared. My supervisor told me I must have made a mistake, and the next time I saw something wrong, I didn't say a word. Because they had footage of you. Because they had footage, and because everyone knew what happened to girls who made trouble. You get isolated. You get reassigned. You get destroyed. So you keep your head down and you transfer out as soon as you can, and you try to forget it ever happened. Riley's mind was racing. This wasn't just sexual harassment. This was organized corruption. They were using coercion to silence witnesses to smuggling operations, trafficking operations. Maybe worse. The blackmail was the enforcement mechanism for something much bigger. Amy, Riley said carefully, if someone stopped them, if someone exposed this and made sure it couldn't happen to anyone else, would you be willing to testify? Chen's laugh was bitter. Testify? Against a chief warrant officer, a lieutenant, and half the command structure? With what evidence? The footage is locked on Ventress's servers, and nobody's ever getting access to that without a warrant, and you can't get a warrant without evidence, and you can't get evidence without... She stopped. Who are you, really? Why are you asking me this? Riley made a choice. Because I'm going into Base 7 on Friday, and I'm going to get you that evidence. But I need to know what I'm facing. You're insane. They'll bury you. Not if I bury them first. Chen was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Smaller, but steadier. There's a phrase they use. They make you say it on camera. I volunteered for extra training. That's how they frame it later if anyone asks. You wanted it. You asked for it. It was consensual. Do you remember anything else? Anything specific about the room, the setup, the cameras are hidden. At least 2 angles, maybe 3. Ventress controls them remotely. And there's a chair in the center of the mat. They make you sit in it while they stand around you. It's a dominance thing, psychological positioning. Chen's breath hitched. Riley, if that's even your real name, don't go in there. Whatever you think you're going to accomplish, it's not worth what they'll do to you. It is if it stops them from doing it to anyone else. Then God help you, Chen whispered, because nobody else will. The line went dead. Riley sat in her car for a long time, staring at the phone in her hand. She thought about Somalia, about the translator who'd worked with her team for 8 months, who'd risked her life every single day to help American forces navigate a city that wanted them dead. About the night Riley's unit got ambushed and the translator got separated from the convoy. About the way Riley had searched for her for 3 days, following rumors and leads and dead ends, until she found her body in a burned-out building with evidence of what had been done to her before she died. About the way Riley had promised herself, standing over that body, that she would never let it happen again, that she would never be too late, never be too careful, never be too afraid to act when someone needed help. That promise had nearly gotten her killed
a dozen times since.
It had also saved lives, and it was the only reason she was here now, about to walk into a trap with nothing but a hidden recorder and the absolute certainty that these men had never faced someone who fought back with documentation instead of just fear. Wednesday morning, Riley was running a small unit tactics course when Ventress showed up. He leaned against the wall with his phone out, just like before, and this time, Riley walked straight toward him. "You recording this?" she asked, loud enough that everyone could hear. Ventress looked up, startled. "What? No, I'm just—" "Then put the phone away. This is a training session, not a photo op." "I'm just taking notes." Riley stepped closer. "I said put it away." For a moment, Ventress looked like he might argue. Then he saw the way Riley was looking at him. Not angry, not aggressive, just absolutely certain. And he slid the phone into his pocket. "Yes, ma'am." Riley held his gaze for another 3 seconds, then turned back to the class. But she'd made her point, and she'd confirmed something important. Ventress wasn't used to people saying no. That afternoon, Riley found an encrypted email waiting on her burner laptop when she got back to her room. It was from Torres, her NCIS handler, and it contained a single attachment, a personnel file for Lieutenant Kira Moss. Riley opened it and started reading. Moss had been at JMTC for 4 years. Before that, she'd been stationed at 3 other joint training facilities, all of which had elevated complaint rates and low follow-through on investigations. She'd been named in 2 separate Inspector General reports for creating hostile environments. But both times the findings were deemed unsubstantiated, and she'd been quietly transferred. The pattern was clear. Moss was a professional enabler. She moved from base to base, providing cover for men like Reeve, and when things got too hot, she moved on. She'd perfected the art of looking helpful while ensuring nothing ever changed. Riley closed the file and typed a response. "What's her connection to the smuggling?" Torres replied within minutes. "We don't know yet, but every base she's been stationed at has had logistics irregularities, inventory discrepancies, unauthorized shipments, cargo that goes missing. Nothing provable, but the pattern matches. We think she's not just enabling the sexual misconduct. She's enabling the criminal enterprise behind it." Riley stared at the screen. "So the blackmail isn't the crime, it's the cover-up." Torres: "Exactly. They're running weapons, maybe drugs, maybe both. They blackmail anyone who notices. And Moss is the one who makes sure victims think they're alone, think they're crazy, think no one will believe them. What do you need from me?" "Evidence of both, the blackmail and the smuggling. We can't move on one without the other, or they'll just claim it's isolated misconduct and the real operation stays buried." Riley typed, "I'll get you both." Torres: "Riley, be careful. These people are professionals. They've done this before. They know how to cover their tracks." Riley's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed, "So do I." She logged off, erased her digital footprint, and sat in the dark for a long time. Friday was 2 days away. She had 48 hours to prepare for a situation she couldn't fully predict, against people who'd done this enough times to have it down to a system. But systems had weaknesses, and Riley had been trained by the best in the world to find weaknesses and exploit them. Thursday night, she got the message. It came through the official base communication app, marked as a calendar notification. Professional Development Session /Bay 7/2100 Friday /Attendance mandatory for guest instructors. Mandatory. Like they weren't even pretending anymore. Riley screenshotted it, uploaded it to her encrypted cloud, and started her final preparations. She charged both phones fully. She tested the audio recorder hidden in her watch band, the one that looked like a standard fitness tracker, but could record 72 hours of clean audio. She checked the GPS beacon sewn into the lining of her left boot, the one that would ping her location every 30 seconds once activated. And she wrote out her dead man's switch email, the one that would auto-send to Torres, to NCIS headquarters, and to 3 separate journalists if she didn't check in by 2200 Friday night. The email was simple. If you're reading this, I'm either dead or detained. Attached are audio files, personnel records, and location data from JMTC Bay 7. Chief Warrant Officer Dalton Reeve, Petty Officer Marcus Hale, Specialist Corey Ventris, and Lieutenant Kira Moss are operating a blackmail and smuggling network.
They lure female personnel into compromising situations, film them, and use the footage to ensure silence about criminal activity. I went in alone to gather evidence because that's the only way to prove the system. If I don't make it out, make sure they don't either. She set the timer for 2,200 and tried not to think about what it would mean if that email actually sent. Friday came too fast and too slow at the same time. Riley went through her training rotations on autopilot, her mind already in Bay 7, already running through scenarios. What would they try first? How far would they go? At what point would she need to fight instead of gather evidence? At 20:30, she stood in her barracks room, staring at herself in the mirror. She looked calm. She looked ready. She looked like someone who'd done this 100 times before. The truth was, she was terrified. Not of Reeve, not of Hale, not of the physical threat. She could handle that. She was terrified of failing, of walking into that room and freezing, of getting the evidence but not enough evidence, of being one more woman who went into Bay 7 and came out broken. She thought about Amy Chen's voice on the phone, about Corporal Delacroix's warning, about the 12 women who'd transferred out rather than fight back. And she thought about the translator in Somalia, about the promise she'd made standing over her body. Riley activated the GPS beacon. She turned on the audio recorder. She sent a final message to Torres. Going in. If you don't hear from me in 1 hour, come in loud. Then she walked out the door, across the base, toward Bay 7, and whatever was waiting inside. The hallway was empty. The lights were dim. The camera above the door was angled wrong, just like Delacroix had said, pointing at nothing. Riley stopped in front of the door. She could hear voices inside, low, male, confident. She put her hand on the handle, and she pushed it open. The door closed behind her with a sound that felt permanent. Riley heard the lock engage, that specific metallic click that meant someone had thrown the deadbolt from the inside. Her heart rate didn't spike. She'd trained it not to. But she felt the shift in her body, the way her muscles prepared for what came next without her conscious mind telling them to. Bay 7 wasn't what she expected. No elaborate setup, no obvious camera equipment. Just a standard training mat, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and 3 men who looked like they'd been waiting for her. Chief Reeve stood near the center, arms crossed. Marcus Hale leaned against the far wall, blocking the emergency exit. And Corey Ventris sat on a folding chair with his phone already out, already recording. Lieutenant Moss stood by the door Riley had just entered. She smiled like they were all friends here. "Thanks for coming, Lieutenant Cade," Reeve said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "We know you're new, so we wanted to bring you up to speed on how things really work around here." Riley kept her hands loose at her sides. "I'm listening." "Good. That's smart." Reeve walked a slow circle around her. "See, JMTC runs on trust. Trust between teammates. Trust that what happens in training stays in training. Trust that everyone understands their role." He stopped in front of her. We've been watching you all week. The way you challenged me in front of my people. The way you beat Marcus's record. The way you've been asking questions. Questions are how you learn. Questions are how you make trouble, Hale said from the wall. His voice was deeper than Reeves', slower. And trouble gets people hurt. Riley glanced at him, then back at Reeve. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Reeve gestured to the chair in the center of the mat. Sit down. This'll be easier if you cooperate. I'm fine standing.
Reeves' expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. It wasn't a request. Riley looked at the chair. She looked at Ventress with his phone, at the angle he'd positioned himself to capture her face. She looked at Moss by the door, still smiling that empty smile, and she understood with perfect clarity that this was the moment. The moment Chen had warned her about. The moment every woman before her had faced alone and scared, and with no one coming to help. Except Riley wasn't alone. She had a recorder running. She had GPS pinging her location. She had Torres waiting for her signal. And she had 5 years of SEAL training that taught her how to survive when survival looked impossible. She walked to the chair and sat down. Smart, Reeves said. He nodded to Ventress. Make sure you get this. Ventress adjusted his angle. The red light on his phone blinked steadily. Reeve moved behind Riley. She felt his presence there. Felt the intentional invasion of her space. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to answer some questions. You're going to say some things for the camera. And then we're all going to have an understanding about how this place works. What kind of questions? Personal ones. His voice dropped lower, close to her ear. Tell us about your relationships, your weaknesses, the things you wouldn't want your commands to know. Riley's jaw tightened. That's not relevant to training. It's relevant to trust, Moss said from the door. Her voice was softer than Reeves', almost motherly. We need to know you're one of us, Riley. That you understand loyalty. That you won't run to IG or NCIS or whoever the moment something makes you uncomfortable. There it was. NCIS. They'd just told her exactly what they were afraid of. Riley kept her voice steady. I understand loyalty. I also understand regulations. And this isn't regulations, Reeve interrupted, are for people who don't know how to accomplish the mission. Real operators understand that sometimes you have to work outside the lines. His hand settled on her shoulder. Not aggressive. Not yet. Just heavy. Tell me, Lieutenant, what would NSW say if they knew their golden girl was asking questions about supply chain irregularities, about shipments that don't match manifests? Riley's blood went cold. They knew. They knew she talked to Chen, or they'd figured out she was looking into the logistics angle, which meant they were about to do more than just blackmail her. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Sure you don't. Reeves' grip tightened. Say it for the camera. Say you came here voluntarily. Say you're interested in advanced training opportunities. No. The room went quiet. Hale pushed off the wall and took a step forward. Ventress's phone stayed steady, recording everything. Say it, Reeve repeated, and now his other hand came around, fingers gripping her chin, forcing her head up toward the camera. Say you volunteered for extra training. Say it. Riley's hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage, from the absolute clarity of knowing these men had done this to a dozen women before her and thought they'd do it to a dozen more. From knowing that every second of this was being recorded on her watch and on Ventress's phone, and that when this was over, she was going to make sure they heard it played back in a courtroom. Say it, Hale echoed, moving closer. Moss took a step forward, too. Riley, just cooperate. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Riley looked up at Ventress and his camera. She made sure she was staring straight into the lens when she spoke. I volunteered for nothing. You locked me in here. You're trying to coerce me into making statements for blackmail purposes, and this is all being recorded. Reeves' hand jerked her chin harder. Wrong answer. Is it? Riley's voice stayed level. Because from where I'm sitting, you just committed conspiracy to obstruct justice on camera. And if you're smart, you'll unlock that door right now and let me walk out. Reeve laughed. It was an ugly sound. You think anyone's going to believe you? You think your word means anything against mine? Against all of ours? He leaned in close. We've been doing this for 3 years. We know how to make it look consensual. We know how to make you look crazy. And by the time we're done, you'll transfer out just like all the others, and no one will remember your name. 3 years, Riley repeated quietly. You just admitted to a 3-year conspiracy on recording. Something flickered across Reeves' face. Doubt. Just for a second. Ventress spoke up from behind his phone. Chief, maybe we should— Shut up, Corey. Reeves' grip on Riley shifted. Marcus, help me get her on her feet. We're going to do this the hard way. Hale moved in from the side. His hand reached for Riley's arm. And that's when Riley decided she'd gathered enough evidence. She moved fast. Faster than Hale expected. Faster than Reeve could react. Her hand snapped up and caught Reeves' wrist, twisting it away from her face with a joint lock that made him gasp. She used his own forward momentum to pull him off balance, then drove her elbow into his solar plexus. The air left his lungs in a rush, and he staggered backward. Hale grabbed for her. Riley was already turning, already inside his reach. She drove her knee into his groin with every ounce of force she had. He folded like a lawn chair, hit the mat, and didn't get up. Ventress dropped his phone. He backed against the wall, hands up. Wait, I'm not— Riley crossed the distance in 2 steps and caught his wrist before he could run. She twisted it behind his back and drove him face first against the wall. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't even breathe hard. Moss moved toward the door. Riley's voice cracked like a whip. Touch that handle, and I'll drop you too. Moss froze. Riley kept Ventress pinned with one hand and reached down to pick up his phone with the other. The recording was still going. She could see the timestamp. 12 minutes and 40 seconds. All of it. Every word. Every threat. Every confession. She looked at the screen and saw exactly what she needed to see. A folder structure visible in the background of the app. Dozens of files. Hundreds of files, all labeled with names and dates and locations. Riley's thumb moved across the screen. She didn't stop the recording. She just switched it to airplane mode and locked it. Chain of custody preserved. Reeve was on his hands and knees, gasping. You just ended your career. Riley looked down at him. Her voice was cold and clear. No. You ended yours 3 years ago. I just documented it. She pulled out her own phone and took a photo of Ventress's locked screen showing the folder structure. Then she activated her watch recorder's emergency beacon. Torres would get the signal in less than 30 seconds. NCIS would be rolling in less than 5 minutes. Who are you? Moss whispered. Riley looked at her. Lieutenant Junior Grade Riley Cade, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. I've been embedded here for a week gathering evidence of a blackmail and smuggling operation. You just gave me everything I needed. The color drained from Moss's face. Reeve tried to stand. Riley put a boot on his shoulder and pressed him back down. "Stay down. You move again, and I'll make sure you don't get up." "This won't stick," Reeves said through gritted teeth. "You assaulted us. You attacked. I defended myself against a coordinated assault," Riley interrupted. "And I did it while recording everything."
"Including the part where you admitted to running this operation for 3 years. She looked at each of them in turn. "Here's what happens next. NCIS is going to walk through that door in about 4 minutes. They're going to seize Ventress's phone and his servers. They're going to find every file, every victim, every piece of evidence you thought you'd hidden. And then they're going to charge all of you with conspiracy, coercion, obstruction, and accessory to whatever smuggling operation you've been covering up." "Smuggling?" Ventress's voice cracked. "I don't know anything about—" "Shut up, Corey," Reeves snarled. But Riley saw it in Ventress's eyes. Fear. Real fear. He was the tech guy. He ran the blackmail operation. But he wasn't part of the inner circle. He didn't know about the weapons, the inventory fraud, the real reason they needed to silence women who asked questions. Riley pressed the advantage. "Corey, listen to me. You're looking at 20 years as an accessory."
"Unless you cooperate. Unless you tell NCIS where the files are stored, who had access, and what the blackmail was covering up." She paused. "This is your one chance to save yourself. What's it going to be?" Ventress looked at Reeve. Reeve stared back with murder in his eyes. "Don't say a word," Reeve said. 20 years, Riley repeated, in a federal prison, for covering up crimes you didn't even profit from. Or you talk now, and maybe you see daylight again before you're 50. Ventress's mouth worked. "The files are on an encrypted server. Off base. I have the access codes." "Corey!" Reeves' voice was raw. Riley kept her eyes on Ventress. "What was the blackmail covering up?" "I don't know all of it, I swear. I just maintained the files. But I heard them talking, Reeve and some supply officer. Something about shipping containers. Weapons going to buyers in South America. They were using base logistics to move the cargo, and they needed to make sure nobody asked questions." Riley felt something click into place. Weapons trafficking. Using military supply chains to smuggle arms to foreign buyers. And they'd built an entire blackmail network to ensure silence from anyone who might notice the discrepancies. "Who else knows?" she asked. "I don't know. I just handled the tech. I didn't—" The door exploded inward. Not kicked. Breached. 3 NCIS agents in tactical gear poured through with weapons drawn. "Federal agents! Hands where we can see them!" Riley released Ventress and raised her hands. "Lieutenant Cade, NSW. I'm the operative. These 4 are your suspects." The lead agent, Torres, Riley recognized her from briefing photos, lowered her weapon slightly. "Clear?" "Clear. 1 phone with evidence in my possession, locked and preserved. Suspect Ventress just confessed to knowledge of weapons trafficking on recording. I need immediate seizure of his off-site server before he can remote wipe it." Torres barked orders into her radio. 2 agents moved to secure Reeve and Hale, who were still on the ground. Another cuffed Ventress. Moss stood frozen by the door until an agent guided her hands behind her back. "You set us up," Reeve spat. Blood ran from his split lip where he'd bit it when Riley struck him. "You came here to entrap us." "I came here to stop you," Riley said, "and I did." Torres stepped close to Riley. "You okay?" "Yeah, they didn't touch me, not the way they planned." Riley handed over Ventress's phone. 12-minute recording, full confession to conspiracy, admission of 3-year operation, reference to smuggling, and visible folder structure showing the archive.
Torres took the phone like it was made of gold. "This is good work, Lieutenant." "It's not finished," Riley said. "Ventress mentioned a supply officer, someone on base helping them move weapons through logistics channels. We need to ID them before they destroy evidence." "We're on it."
We've had surveillance on the supply depot all week. Anyone who tries to access files tonight gets picked up. Torres glanced at the suspect being zip-tied and read their rights.
"You sure you're okay? You took a hell of a risk going in alone." Riley thought about Amy Chen, about Corporal Delacroix, about the 12 women who'd transferred out. "I wasn't alone. They were with me. Every woman they hurt. That's who I was fighting for." Torres nodded slowly. "Then you won. Clean." But Riley didn't feel like she'd won. Not yet. Because winning meant more than catching these 4. It meant making sure the system that enabled them got torn apart too. "Torres," Riley said quietly, "when you process that phone, you're going to find evidence of institutional failure. Chain of command knew something was wrong and didn't act. Equal opportunity reports that got buried. Complaint patterns that got ignored. This wasn't just 4 bad actors. This was systemic." "I know," Torres said.
"And we're going after all of it. But right now, you need to come with us. Give a formal statement, get checked out by medical, then go sleep for about 12 hours.
Riley looked at Reeve being hauled to his feet. He met her eyes, and she saw it there. The hatred, the shock, the absolute inability to process that a woman half his size had destroyed everything he'd built. "You ruined us," he said. "No," Riley said. "You ruined yourselves. I just made sure everyone knew it." They dragged him out. Hale followed, still doubled over. Ventress was crying. Moss walked out with her head down, silent. Riley stood in the empty training bay and felt her hands start shaking. The adrenaline crash hit her all at once. She'd been in firefights. She'd been shot at. She'd jumped out of helicopters into hostile territory. But this quiet, controlled violence, this psychological warfare, this fight against people who were supposed to be on her side, this was different. This was harder.
Torres put a hand on her shoulder. "Come on, let's get you out of here." Riley nodded. But before she left, she pulled out her phone and sent a text to Amy Chen. Just 3 words. "It's over. They're done." Then she walked out of Bay 7 for the last time, knowing that the room would never hurt anyone again. The NCIS field office smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. Riley sat in a gray interview room at 0300 hours, wrapped in a blanket someone had draped over her shoulders, watching Torres and 2 other agents work through Ventress's phone on a laptop screen that cast blue light across their faces. "Jesus Christ," one of them muttered. "This goes back 4 years, not 3. Torres looked up. "How many files?" 216. Maybe more in the deleted cache we're recovering now. The agent scrolled through folder names, his face getting paler with each one. "They've got dates, ranks, names. They organized it like a filing system." Riley's stomach turned. 216 women. 216 careers threatened. 216 people who'd walked into that room thinking they were safe and walked out knowing they weren't. "Can you identify the victims?" Riley asked, her voice rough from talking through her statement for the past 2 hours. Torres nodded. "We're cross-referencing with transfer records now, but Riley, this is bigger than JMTC. Some of these files are from other bases, Norfolk, San Diego, Pendleton. They've been running this operation across multiple installations." Riley leaned forward.
How? Reeves been stationed at 6 different bases in the past decade. Every time he transfers, he takes Moss with him. New location, same system. They recruit local enforcers like Hale, local tech support like Ventress, and they start over. And nobody caught them. Nobody looked, Torres said quietly. Or if they did, they got buried. We're pulling IG reports now.
I'm betting we find complaints that went nowhere. The door opened, and a senior agent walked in, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of face that said she'd seen everything twice. Her credentials identified her as Special Agent Carver, the regional NCIS commander. "Lieutenant Cade," she said, extending a hand. "Hell of a night's work." Riley shook it. "Just doing my job, ma'am." "Your job was intelligence gathering. You did that and then some." Carver pulled up a chair. "We just executed search warrants at Ventress's apartment and a storage unit he rented off base. Found 3 backup servers with additional files. Found financial records showing payments from offshore accounts. And found shipping manifests that match the inventory discrepancies your investigation flagged." "Weapons?" "Weapons, ammunition, and tactical equipment. About $4 million worth over the past 3 years. They were routing it through military cargo shipments to a shell company in Colombia, then selling it to cartel buyers. Carver's expression hardened.
"And they blackmailed anyone who noticed. Supply clerks, logistics officers, inventory auditors. Mostly women, because they figured women were easier to intimidate." "They figured wrong," Torres said. Carver looked at Riley with something like respect. "How'd you know to connect the blackmail to the smuggling? Most people would have seen it as separate issues." Riley thought about Amy Chen's voice on the phone. "Because someone told me they flagged a shipment and then got silenced. And I figured if they silenced her, they were silencing others for the same reason. The blackmail wasn't the crime. It was the enforcement mechanism." "Smart." Carver stood. "We're moving fast now. We've got arrest teams picking up 3 more suspects, a supply officer, a logistics chief, and a civilian contractor who handled the offshore accounts.
We're also executing warrants on Lieutenant Moss's residence and Chief Reeves' off-base storage. By morning, this whole network comes down." Riley felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief, not yet, but progress. "What happens to the victims?" Carver's expression softened. "That's complicated. We're legally obligated to contact them, but we can't force them to cooperate. Some will want justice. Some will want to pretend it never happened. We'll offer counseling, legal support, witness protection if needed. But ultimately, it's their choice." "They shouldn't have to choose," Riley said. "They should be able to testify without fear." Agreed. But the system doesn't always work that way. Carver paused. "Which is why what you did matters. You gave them a choice they didn't have before. You proved it could be stopped." Riley nodded, but something bitter sat in her throat. Proving it could be stopped wasn't the same as undoing the damage. Those women still carried what had happened to them. That didn't just disappear because the perpetrators got arrested. Torres must have seen it on her face. "You can't fix everything, Riley. You can only fix what's in front of you. And you fixed this." "Did I?" Riley looked at the laptop screen, at the folders full of evidence, at the sheer volume of harm documented in organized files. "Or did I just find the bodies after they were already buried?" Nobody answered that. By 0700, Riley was released to go back to base and get some sleep. She walked across the parking lot in the gray pre-dawn light and found Corporal Delacroix sitting on the hood of a truck, waiting. "I heard," Delacroix said. "Is it true? They arrested all of them?" "Yeah. And they found the files. All of them." Delacroix's eyes filled with tears.
She didn't try to hide them. I thought nobody would ever believe us. I thought we'd just keep transferring out one by one until there was nobody left to tell.
Riley sat down next to her.
You were right to tell me. You were right to trust someone. I didn't know if I could. After Moss, after she made it seem like we were crazy, like we were making it up. Delacroix's voice broke. I started believing her. I started thinking maybe it was in my head. It wasn't. And now everyone knows it wasn't. They sat in silence for a while. Then Delacroix asked, What happens now? To us, I mean. The people who stayed. Riley didn't have a good answer. You heal. However you need to. However long it takes. What if we can't? Then you try anyway. Because the alternative is letting them win. Riley looked at her. They wanted you silent. They wanted you scared. They wanted you to think you were alone. You proved them wrong by surviving, by speaking up when it matters, by not letting what they did define who you become. Delacroix wiped her eyes. You make it sound easy. It's not easy. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but you're still here. That means you're already winning. The sun broke over the horizon, spilling orange light across the base. Riley watched it rise and thought about Somalia again. About promises made and kept. About the women who didn't make it and the ones who did. About the difference between justice and healing, and how sometimes you had to settle for one because you couldn't guarantee the other. Lieutenant, Delacroix said softly, thank you for believing me, for doing something. Riley nodded. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell. The next 3 days were chaos. NCIS processed evidence around the clock. Base Command brought in external investigators to review every complaint filed in the past 5 years. The JAG office started building court-martial cases against Reeve, Hale, and Moss. Ventress took a plea deal in exchange for testimony and server access. The supply officer tried to run and got picked up at the Mexican border with a duffel bag full of cash, and the media got hold of it. By Wednesday morning, Riley's phone was blowing up with calls from reporters, advocacy groups, congressional staffers. She ignored all of them. This wasn't about publicity. This was about accountability. But the base commander called her in anyway. Captain Rhodes looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. He gestured for Riley to sit, then just stared at her for a long moment. You destroyed my command, he finally said. Riley kept her face neutral. With respect, sir, your command was already destroyed. I just documented it. Rhodes flinched. You could have come to me, could have gone through proper channels. Your proper channels buried 12 complaints in 2 years. Your equal opportunity officer was part of the conspiracy. Your chain of command either didn't know or didn't care. Riley leaned forward. Sir, if I'd come to you first, you would have circled the wagons. You would have protected the command over the victims.
Because that's what always happens.
You don't know that, don't I? Riley pulled out her phone and opened a file. This is your incident report database. 43 complaints filed by men, all processed. 6 filed by women. 4 marked resolved with no investigation. You want to tell me that's a coincidence? Rhodes looked at the screen, then away. I didn't know. That's the problem, sir. You should have known. That was your job. Riley put the phone away. And now the Navy's going to ask why you didn't. Why your command climate allowed this. Why women were silenced and men were protected. You're going to have to answer for that. Rhodes's jaw tightened. Are you threatening me, Lieutenant? No, sir. I'm telling you what's coming. NCIS is interviewing your entire leadership structure. Congress is asking questions. Victims are lawyering up. This doesn't end with 4 arrests. This ends with institutional reform or institutional failure. Your choice which.
I could end your career for insubordination. You could try, Riley said. But I'm the SEAL who took down a smuggling ring and a blackmail network that operated under your command for 3 years. I'm the hero in this story, whether you like it or not. You come after me, and you prove everything I just said.
Rhodes stared at her with something between anger and defeat. Finally, he said, "What do you want?" "Real accountability. Not performative. Real. Fire everyone who failed to act on complaints. Bring in independent oversight. Create reporting systems that bypass chain of command. Give victims a voice that can't be silenced by rank or reputation." Riley stood. "And publicly acknowledge that this happened on your watch, and you failed to stop it. That'll ruin me. Respectfully, sir, you ruined yourself. I'm just asking you to own it." She walked out before he could respond. That night, Riley got a call from Amy Chen. "I saw the news," Chen said. Her voice was shaky but stronger than before. "They arrested all of them." "Yeah. And they found the files." "All of them. Yours included. NCIS is reaching out to everyone. You'll get a call soon if you haven't already." Chen was quiet for a long time. Then, "Are they going to make us testify?" "Only if you want to. It's voluntary. But they're building cases with or without victim testimony. The evidence is that strong." "What if I don't want to? What if I just want to forget it happened?" Riley understood that. She understood wanting to walk away from pain, from memory, from the weight of being defined by the worst thing that ever happened to you. Then that's your right. Nobody gets to tell you how to heal. "But you think I should testify?" "I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night," Riley said carefully. "If that's testifying, great. If it's moving on and never looking back, that's great too. There's no wrong answer here." Chen's breath hitched. "I spent 2 years being scared. 2 years thinking nobody would believe me. 2 years hating myself for not fighting back." She paused. "I don't want to be scared anymore." "Then don't be." "Is it really that simple?" "No," Riley said honestly. "It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But you survived what they did to you. You can survive what comes next." Chen laughed, but it sounded like crying. "You make it sound like I'm brave." "You are. You told me the truth when you could have stayed silent. You helped me walk into that room knowing what I was facing. That's brave." "I think you're the brave one." "We both are," Riley said. "And so is every woman who's going to stand up and say, 'This happened to me, and I'm not hiding anymore.' That's what breaks systems like this. Not one person. All of us." Chen was quiet again. Then, "Okay, I'll testify. Tell NCIS I'll testify." Riley felt something crack open in her chest. Relief, maybe, or hope. "Thank you." "No," Chen said softly. "Thank you for making it possible to choose." The call ended, and Riley sat in her barracks room, alone, staring at her phone. She thought about all the calls that would come next. All the women who'd been silenced, finding their voices again. All the testimonies that would build a case so airtight that no defense attorney could spin it away. All the institutional failures being dragged into light. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to undo what had been done. But it was something. And sometimes, something was all you got. Torres called an hour later.
We've got 8 victims willing to testify so far, 3 more considering it. The rest want support but not courtroom exposure. We're working with victim advocates to make sure everyone gets what they need. What about the smuggling case? Airtight. We've got manifests, financial records, testimony from Ventress and the supply officer. The cartel connection is solid.
DOJ is talking federal charges on top of the military court-martial. Torres paused. Riley, this is a career-making case. You're going to get medal consideration, promotion potential, maybe even congressional recognition. Riley didn't care about any of that.
What about the women?
What about them?
Are they getting justice or just publicity?
Torres sighed. Both, probably. You can't control how this plays out in the media. You can only control the evidence. And the evidence is good enough that these bastards are going away for decades.
That's not the same as healing.
No, Torres agreed. But it's a start. And sometimes a start is all you can give people. Riley ended the call and walked outside. The base was quiet at night, just the sound of distant traffic and the hum of generators. She walked past the training bay, past the administrative building, past the corridor where the morale board used to hang before someone tore it down in the middle of the investigation. She walked until she found herself standing outside Bay 7. The door was sealed with evidence tape, the lock changed, the interior dark. She stood there for a long time, thinking about the women who'd walked through that door before her. The ones who'd survived, and the ones who hadn't. The ones who'd spoken up, and the ones who'd stayed silent. She thought about the translator in Somalia, about the promise she'd made, that she'd never be too late again. And she realized she'd kept that promise. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. She pulled out her phone and sent one final message to Torres. Make sure every victim knows they weren't alone. Make sure they know this wasn't their fault. Make sure they know someone believed them. Torres replied immediately. Already on it. And Riley? You did good. Better than good. Riley didn't respond. She just pocketed her phone, took one last look at Bay 7, and walked away. Behind her, the door stayed sealed. The room stayed dark, and somewhere across the country, women who'd been silenced were finding their voices again. That was enough. For tonight, that was enough. 6 months later, Riley stood in a conference room at Naval Special Warfare Command in San Diego, watching a PowerPoint presentation she'd given 40 times before and still hadn't gotten used to. The slide on the screen showed a flowchart of the JMTC network, red lines connecting Reeve to Moss to Hale to Ventress to 3 other bases where the same system had operated for years. 216 victims, she said to the room full of senior officers and NCIS personnel. 4 military installations, 12 years of operation, $4.2 million in weapons trafficking revenue. She clicked to the next slide. And it stayed hidden because the system was designed to silence anyone who noticed. A rear admiral in the front row raised his hand. Lieutenant Cade, with all due respect, you're describing a criminal conspiracy, not a systemic failure. Riley looked at him. She'd learned over the past 6 months that senior leadership hated the word systemic because it implied they were responsible.
Sir, in the 2 years before I arrived at JMTC, 18 formal complaints were filed regarding hostile environment, sexual harassment, and retaliation. 17 were marked resolved with no investigation. 1 was investigated, and the complainant was transferred for attitude problems. She paused. That's not a conspiracy. That's a system working exactly as designed. The room went quiet. The admiral didn't have a response. Riley continued. Chief Reeve was flagged in 3 separate IG reports at previous duty stations. Lieutenant Moss had a pattern of EO complaints wherever she served. Both were promoted and transferred rather than investigated. The system didn't fail to catch them. The system protected them. A captain near the back spoke up.
So what's your recommendation? Create reporting mechanisms that bypass chain of command entirely. Independent oversight with authority to investigate senior personnel. Mandatory body cameras in training environments. And most importantly, believe victims the first time they speak up. Because every woman who came forward at JMTC was dismissed, discredited, or destroyed. That's not a failure of individuals. That's institutional culture. Another officer, a woman this time, asked, "What happens to the victims? Are they testifying?" 14 testified at the court-martial. 8 more provided depositions. The rest chose not to participate, which is their right. Riley's voice softened. But all of them received counseling, legal support, and connection to victim advocacy resources. And all of them were told the same thing. This wasn't your fault. You weren't alone. And someone believed you. Did it help? Ask them in 5 years. Healing takes longer than prosecution. Riley clicked to the next slide. But what I can tell you is that 3 months after the arrests, not a single woman has transferred out of JMTC for hostile environment reasons. The culture changed because the threat was removed and accountability was enforced. The Rear Admiral leaned forward. You're being recommended for a Navy Cross. You know that? Riley hadn't known that. She didn't want to know that. With respect, sir, I don't need a medal. I need institutional reform. I need every base in the fleet to implement the changes I just outlined. I need survivors to have resources, not just publicity. And I need senior leadership to stop calling it an isolated incident and start calling it what it is, a pattern we ignored until someone got hurt bad enough to force our hand. The Admiral's face reddened. Lieutenant, you're dangerously close to insubordination. No, sir. I'm dangerously close to telling the truth. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. Torres, sitting in the back corner, caught Riley's eye and made a subtle calm down gesture. Riley ignored her. These men operated for 12 years, Riley said. They destroyed careers, silenced witnesses, and trafficked weapons to cartels. And they did it while wearing our uniform, on our bases, with our resources. If that doesn't make you angry enough to change everything about how we handle misconduct, then we're going to have this same conversation again in 5 years, with different names and the same pattern. The room stayed silent. Finally, the Rear Admiral said, Noted, Lieutenant. Dismissed. Riley walked out, knowing she'd just torpedoed any chance of making 04 on time. She didn't care. In the hallway, Torres caught up with her. You just called out a flag officer in front of 40 people. He deserved it. Probably. But you're not making friends in high places. Good, Riley said. Friends in high places are how people like Reeve get away with it for 12 years. Torres laughed despite herself. Fair point. But for what it's worth, half that room agreed with you. They're just too scared to say it out loud. Then they're part of the problem. Maybe. Or maybe they're trying to fix it from the inside, and you're making it harder by pissing off everyone with decision-making authority. Riley stopped walking. Torres, do you think anything I said in there was wrong? No. Then what am I supposed to do? Smile and nod while they call it an isolated incident? Pretend systemic failure doesn't exist because it makes admirals uncomfortable? Torres sighed. No, but you could try diplomacy. Just once. I tried diplomacy at JMTC. It got 12 women silenced before I showed up.
Riley started walking again.
I'm done being diplomatic.
The court-martial took 8 weeks. Riley testified on day 3, recounting everything that happened in Bay 7 with clinical precision. The defense attorney tried to rattle her, suggesting she'd entrapped Reeve, that she'd used excessive force, that she'd been looking for glory instead of justice. Riley looked at the jury panel and said, "I walked into that room knowing I might not walk out. I did it anyway, because 14 women before me walked into that room and had their careers destroyed. If wanting to stop that makes me glory-seeking, then I guess I'm guilty." The defense attorney didn't ask any more questions. When the verdict came down, Riley wasn't in the courtroom. She was at a coffee shop in Norfolk, meeting with Amy Chen for the first time in person. Chen looked different than Riley expected. Younger, maybe, or just less beaten down than her voice had sounded on the phone 6 months ago. She smiled nervously when Riley sat down across from her. "I testified yesterday," Chen said. "I thought I'd be more scared, but I just felt angry. Angry that it took so long. Angry that it happened at all." "That's good," Riley said. "Anger's useful. It means you're not blaming yourself anymore." "I don't know about that." Chen stirred her coffee. "I still think about what I could have done differently. If I'd fought back, if I'd reported it sooner, if I'd just been braver." "Stop," Riley interrupted gently. "You survived. That's brave enough." "You fought back." "Because I walked in knowing what to expect. You didn't. You thought you were getting career counseling and walked into a trap. That's not your failure. That's theirs." Chen's eyes welled up. "I wanted to hate you at first, when I heard what you did, because I kept thinking, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I bite him or fight or... Because you're not a Navy SEAL who spent 5 years learning how to fight," Riley said. "And because you shouldn't have to be. You should have been safe in a training room with senior personnel. The fact that you weren't isn't on you." "The defense attorney said I should have reported it immediately, that waiting 2 months made it look like I was lying." Riley felt rage flash hot in her chest. "Defense attorneys say a lot of things. The jury didn't believe him, and even if they had, it wouldn't change what happened to you." Chen wiped her eyes. "The verdict came down this morning. Did you hear?" Riley's phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't look at it. "No. What did they say?" "Guilty. All counts. Reeve got 20 years. Hale got 15. Moss got 12. Ventress got 6 with credit for cooperation." Riley let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Good." "Is it?" Chen asked. "Because I don't feel better. I thought I would. I thought when they got convicted, I'd feel like it was over. But I just feel tired." "That's normal. Justice and healing aren't the same thing. You can have one without the other."
Then what's the point?"
Riley thought about that.
"The point is they can't hurt anyone else. The point is the next woman who walks into a room like Bay 7 has a system that might actually protect her. The point is, you stood up and said this happened and I'm not hiding it. And that matters, even if it doesn't feel like it right now."
Chen nodded slowly.
"I'm going back to school, getting out of the Navy. I can't be here anymore." "That's okay. You don't owe the Navy anything." "Do you think less of me for leaving?" "No," Riley said firmly. "I think you're doing what you need to do to heal. That takes more courage than staying."
They talked for another hour. Chen told Riley about her plans, about therapy, about the support group she'd joined for military sexual trauma survivors. And she told Riley something else.
"There are other women, from the other bases. Some of them are coming forward now because they saw it was safe to. Because you made it safe to."
Riley's throat tightened. How many? I don't know. Dozens, maybe. And Kiss is still investigating. Chen reached across the table and squeezed Riley's hand.
Thank you for believing me when I was still too scared to believe myself. You're welcome, Riley said. But Chen, you need to start believing yourself now, because I'm not always going to be around to remind you.
Chen smiled.
I'm trying. That's all any of us can do.
A month later, Riley got new orders. Not a reprimand for insubordination, not a transfer to somewhere they could bury her career. A promotion to full lieutenant and assignment to a newly created division, Naval Special Warfare Counter-Institutional Misconduct Group. Her mission was simple: embed in high-risk military environments, investigate corruption that standard channels missed, and build cases against personnel who used rank and authority to commit crimes. She'd be doing what she did at JMTC, permanently,
with full NCIS backing and congressional oversight authority. Riley read the orders 3 times, then called Torres.
Did you do this?
She asked.
Not me, the commandant. Turns out your testimony got recorded and leaked to 3 different congressional committees. They're demanding reform, and you're the face of it. So congratulations, you're now the Navy's official corruption hunter. I didn't ask for this. No, you just walked into a blackmail operation and took down a smuggling ring. What'd you think was going to happen? Torres paused. Look, you can turn it down. Go back to your SEAL team, do the job you signed up for. But between you and me, this is where you're needed. This is where you can make the biggest difference. Riley thought about Amy Chen, about Corporal Delacroix, about the 216 women whose files sat in evidence lockup, about the translator in Somalia who never got justice because Riley hadn't been there in time. I'll take it, she said.
Good. You start Monday. And Riley, don't make me regret recommending you.
You recommended me?
Someone had to. You're an insubordinate pain in the ass, but you're also the only person I trust to actually fix this mess. Don't prove me wrong. Riley smiled.
No promises.
She spent the next 3 months building her new division, recruiting operators who understood both combat and investigation, creating reporting protocols that couldn't be buried by chain of command, establishing partnerships with victim advocacy groups, training personnel to recognize patterns of institutional abuse. And she started something else, something personal. Anchor House opened on a Saturday morning in Virginia Beach. It was a small building, nothing fancy, but it had meeting rooms and counseling spaces and a 24-hour hotline for military personnel dealing with sexual trauma or institutional retaliation. The Anchor logo on the sign matched the tattoo behind Riley's ear. Amy Chen came to the ribbon cutting. So did Corporal Delacroix. So did 6 other women from JMTC who'd testified at the trial.
This is for you,
Riley told them.
For everyone who walked into a room they shouldn't have had to walk into, and came out carrying weight they shouldn't have to carry. This is a place where that weight gets lighter.
One of the women asked,
Does it ever go away completely?
Riley thought about Somalia, about Bay 7, about every mission that had left scars she'd never show anyone.
No, but it gets manageable, and you stop carrying it alone.
6 months after that, Riley was sitting in her office at Naval Special Warfare Command when she got an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Thank you." She opened it.
Lieutenant Cade, you don't know me. My name is Sarah Reeves, and I'm 22 years old. I just finished boot camp, and I'm headed to A school in 2 weeks. I saw your testimony during the congressional hearing.
I watched you tell a room full of admirals and senators that the system failed, and they needed to fix it, or it would happen again. I'm writing because I almost didn't join the Navy.
I was assaulted in college, and I spent 2 years thinking I was too broken to serve, too scared, too weak. And then I watched you stand up in front of everyone and say what happened wasn't your fault, wasn't your weakness, wasn't your shame. You said it was systemic failure and individual courage could crack it open. I'm not as brave as you, but I'm staying, because I saw what happens when one person refuses to stay quiet. Thank you for showing us we're not alone. Sarah Riley read it twice. Then she printed it out and pinned it to the wall above her desk. That night, she got a call from Torres. We've got a situation at Marine Corps Base Quantico. Same pattern as JMTC. Blackmail, missing inventory, women transferring out under suspicious circumstances. Command's asking for your team.
Riley didn't hesitate. We're on it. You know this doesn't end, right? You stop one network and 3 more pop up. You can't save everyone. No, Riley agreed. But I can save the next one, and the one after that. And eventually the system runs out of places to hide. You really believe that? Riley thought about the email from Sarah Reeves, about Amy Chen going back to school, about Corporal Delacroix, who'd just been promoted and was still serving, about the way Bay 7's door stayed sealed and would never open again. Yeah, she said. I do. 3 months later, Riley was testifying before Congress again, not about JMTC this time, about Quantico, about 2 other bases where her team had found similar operations, about the pattern that kept repeating because institutions protected themselves before they protected victims. The question isn't whether this happens, Riley said into the microphone. The question is what we do about it when it does. Do we call it isolated? Do we transfer the perpetrators and hope nobody notices? Or do we acknowledge that silence is complicity, that rank isn't immunity, and that every person who looks away makes the next crime possible? A senator interrupted. Lieutenant, are you suggesting that senior leadership is deliberately enabling criminal behavior? No, sir. I'm saying they're enabling it by doing nothing, which is worse. Because deliberate criminals know they're wrong. People who do nothing think they're just maintaining order. That's a serious accusation. It's a provable fact. Every case my team has investigated started with complaints that got buried, with victims who got silenced, with systems that protected reputation over people. That's not conspiracy. That's culture. And culture doesn't change until someone forces it to. The hearing ran 4 hours. Riley testified for 2 of them. When she finally walked out, her phone was full of messages, some from reporters, some from victim advocacy groups, some from active duty personnel who wanted to report misconduct and didn't know how, and one from an unknown number that just said, "I'm next, but I'm not staying quiet. Thank you for proving it can be done." Riley saved that message. Then she went back to her office and started planning the next investigation. Because Torres was right. It didn't end. There would always be another base, another network, another group of men who thought power meant immunity. But Riley had learned something in Bay 7, something in Somalia, something in every fight she'd ever walked into, knowing she might not walk out of. Systems only work when people believe they're untouchable. And all it takes to break that belief is one person who refuses to stay silent, who gathers evidence instead of just anger, who fights with documentation and determination instead of just fear. One person can't fix everything, but one person can prove it can be fixed. And once that happens, the cracks start spreading. Slowly at first, then faster, until the whole rotten structure comes down. Riley wasn't saving everyone. She was never going to save everyone. But she was saving the next one, and the one after that,
and teaching them to save the ones who came after them. That's how systems break. Not through revolution, through persistence. One woman, one room, one fight at a time. And Riley wasn't stopping until there were no more rooms like Bay 7 left to fight in.